The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in different parts of the world. We have our very good friend from Estonia here, Dr. Professor Tarmo Soomere. Very exciting topic, a new imperative connecting science, society, and policy via social media. So this is our series of IFEES, GEDC IUCEE webinars. Let me take a minute to just tell you a little bit about Dr. Soomere. Tarmo Soomere is a mathematician and a marine scientist. And since 2014, president of the Estonian Academy of Sciences. His scientific interests are mostly concentrated to the analysis and mitigation of marine hazards and preventive methods of coastal protection. He has received twice the National Science Award and State Decoration of Third-Class White Star Order for developing coastal science in Estonia. A highly unusual distinction from a scientist came from society. He was declared the Person of the Year in Estonia, wow, in 2005 by a daily newspaper, The Postman, for his contribution to the forecast of a devastating storm. So it's such a pleasure to have you, sir. And now with that, I hand it over to you, Professor Soomere.
Thank you very much for those warm welcome words. Welcome to everybody in whatever time zone they are. It is a little bit unusual that a mathematician is talking about connecting science, society, and policy, and it's even more unusual that we are talking about those connections which could be made with the use of social media. But things are changing, and we are living in a very rapidly changing world. Somehow, other things are in place and do not change. And one of those things which do not change is the meaning of science, which basically consists of two components, two pillars. First, we harvest new, reliable, and important information. And secondly, and perhaps even more importantly, we have to communicate this information to others. Without the second pillar, things what we do cannot be called science. There are changes, really winds of change in the recent past. My generation, about 20, 25 years ago, was dreaming about entering into a new, brave world of information. Unfortunately, we recognized very soon that it turned out to be a world of noise, legends, memes, political fights, not scientifically based, and with even worse possible biased filters in which also scientists play a role. So the search for reliable information is still the first priority and imperative of scientists. So many scientists do it. And many in society hope that at least scientists do so. But what is changing in this world is that the meaning of facts, single facts, is becoming smaller and smaller as the number of facts is increasing rapidly. So it is more and more important to properly interpret the facts we have and put them into a wider and correct context. When we think about what science means
Can you click show my screen again? I think we lost your screen.
Okay. Is it visible now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yes, I also saw a flicker, so it must have been some communication error. And we talk today very much about communication, so errors are intrinsically present. When we think about how much meaning is behind the word of science, so Wikipedia, which is a Dr. Google today, says it's a systematic enterprise, and it underlines the function of organizing knowledge. So that is true that science doesn't provide any more ultimate truth. It even doesn't provide really the final truth. What it provides is the best existing knowledge in the world, organized in the best possible manner. If we go back 2000 years to Aristotle, then he emphasized that it's connected with the word reliability. So the knowledge, scientific knowledge is logical, rationally explained, and trustworthy in general words. In modern day, when there have become so many scientists around, it's quite fashionable to call science a way of pursuing knowledge, not the knowledge itself. So we know that many people are just trying desperately to become scientists in terms that they do something, not necessarily in a very effective manner, but still doing science is also acceptable in pretty much in quite many areas of science. So another intrinsic feature of science is that it must be reproducible. If somebody has made experiments with falling stone, then also in other parts of the world, in different time zones, and also in different hemispheres, the same rule must hold. Okay, cyclones may rotate differently in different hemispheres, but this is also part of knowledge and science. So without reproducibility, there is no science. And then we have ways of communication of our knowledge. The classic means are scientific journals, which not only communicate, but also archive and document what we do. And now one more player is entering the stage, which is society. And society is something which is more than important, and I shall come back to this aspect very soon. When we talk about communication to anybody, then actually we have sort of wicked problem. We have to communicate something to which we are part of. So it makes sense to very little bit, maybe a little bit humoristically, to look of the consequences of having science in society, and to bring some elements of theory of communication. So if we take the simplest implementation of theory, whatever theory, then if we tailor it for the classic meaning of communication science, then everybody knows, especially mathematicians, that the theory or message or something may be either correct, it could be also wrong, and it could be also irrelevant. And in mathematics, it's still publishable. A much better example of theory is the theory about the core priorities of real estate, things which define the value of real estate. And this is a well-known theory. It's very simple. There are basically three priorities, three basic constituents of the value of real estate, and they are very simply: first, the location; second, the location; third, the location. Almost all other features are secondary, but the meaning of perfect location is a function of time. So many cities have been abandoned, and previously extremely valuable real estates are just today a burden, nothing more. If we implement this simple model for communication of science, then we can also distill the outcome or the basics of communication of science to three principles. What we need for properly communicate science is first the content, good science; second, the content, but put into a wider context; and of course you may already guess that the third pillar is again the content, but now in the context showing how it changes the world. And the remark here to be made very seriously is that the world, our audience, is not our world of scientists or engineers. Nobody in the audience really cares about science or engineering. What people care about, what societies care about, what country leaders care about is how much they can win from science. And it's our task to make it a win-win situation. Perhaps a quite contrast, but pretty much classic example about the importance of context was brought to us by Noam Chomsky half of a century ago. He constructed a nice sentence: colorless green ideas sleep furiously, which is grammatically correct, but semantically nonsensical in the sense that you can't derive from it any message, any understandable meaning. So this is sort of quite, I would say, wide end of the spectrum of communication of science. The messages which might be important for science, but which are completely ununderstandable to society and hardly understandable to fellow scientists. And when a little bit again sarcastically asking the question why some speakers on conferences do not take any questions, maybe they are afraid of this question. In a slightly more diplomatic way, formulating the same is the question which is asked quite frequently from different viewpoints, and this is: did you skip over the interesting parts of your talk on purpose? This kind of communication is dead end. It might work for fellow scientists, but it's a bad example anyway. When we want to talk to society, when we think about connecting science with something which is outside of science, then we, in a way, we have to at least look out, or better, step out of our ivory towers and ask completely different questions, and not from society, but ask questions from ourselves. The simplest question is what is normally asked by journalists: what society would like to ask? Having here term society for very different people, but in a way trying to generalize it. So the next question, when a scientist goes to talk with society or policymakers or decision makers, is the question what he or she already knows. And it doesn't matter whether the knowledge is wrong or correct. And then, more importantly, what he or she thinks he or she knows. It's a completely different thing. It can be established by some means. And then the final question to be asked is what society would do with the correct answer. Many answers what scientists provide today, climate scientists, ecologists, many other scientists, they say that a disaster is looming, which is technically correct today, but which may cause unexpected convulsions of society. So perhaps we should add massive explanations to those answers. When we are going to talk to society or decision makers or policy makers, then a couple of things I think should be made clear beforehand. In classic English language, we distinguish between popularization and communication. So making things popular is what we normally do and what popular science is meant to be for. So the task is simple. Whatever means we use, we make clear to everybody that our science is absolutely cool, it's absolutely necessary, and somebody has to pay for it so that we can make our living for science. It is possible to reach many people in society in those terms without really in-house scientific knowledge. So those things include activities like promotion, selling, brokering, lobbying, etc. The point of communication is in a way similar but radically different. Communication doesn't mean lobbying or commercials. No way. No whitewashing or greenwashing. The point of communication is that those to whom we talk, they must understand the point. Which means that this is the task which scientists must make themselves or perform or execute themselves. Whenever there are some brokers in between, that is, I would say, exponentially or explosively increasing probability that failure will be the outcome, because communication of very fine things in science need a great expert. And one more remark at this point is that just message, the flux of bits or bytes, which are just clusters of 8 bits, is not information. If we revert to basics of information theory, also more than half a century ago, great guys like Alan Turing, Norbert Wiener, Claude Shannon, they say that there is no information as such. Information only borns when somebody understands the message. When the message is received, decoded, interpreted, and given some meaning. This is words from Heinz von Förstner. So communication means that the message is received and understood. And we don't ask the question whether the message has understood correctly as we mean it or not, that it must be received. And this is now the problem. Not problem for society, it's problem for those who are handling the facts, who are using the facts for communication. And this problem has been very nicely formulated by Michael Deacon slightly more than 4 years ago. And I think this was the start of so-called post-truth era. He formulated, again, the 3 core characteristics of facts. He said, he wrote actually, that facts are negative, facts are pessimistic, and facts are unpatriotic. So it's extremely hard to communicate facts to people if they know the people that our target, that facts are normally negative, pessimistic, and unpatriotic. And this is the case massively in environmental problems, and more importantly, in basically all social and societal issues. There are very few facts which are soft and optimistic. And this seems to be the essence of science nowadays. It's neither good nor bad, just good to know. With the facts, we have another, I would not say a problem, but it's a situation what we have, a condition perhaps. In good old times, when there were not many facts, Newton times if you wish, there were very few strict facts saying that the stones are always falling down and we have the gravity acceleration which we can measure. And the value of gravity acceleration didn't mean much to simple people in everyday life. So you can say that the uncertainty was very small. The stones were always falling down. But the meaning and impact of those facts was also very low. There was nothing on stake. Now we are in the situation when the number of facts is becoming extremely large. Even more gradually increasing number of facts are talking in terms of probabilities, which means that uncertainties are intrinsically present, which means also that risks of interpretation are always present. And this also means that stakes are very high. If we are now in our situation of pandemic, we observe the 4 new properties of decision making formulated more than a quarter century ago by Silvio Fontowicz and Jerome Ravetz. The 4 principles are simple. Facts are becoming uncertain in terms that they contain uncertainty. People dispute values. Stakes are high, and there is no time for thinking. This situation is called post-normal, and this is which is faced by society every day, and much less by scientists. But if we try to communicate our messages to society, we have to take this into account. So basically what we have to do, we have to break the trend. And the trend is depicted on this cartoon. You see the bookshelf is blocking the way to the right. It should be put on other side to block the wrong way. But facts seem to be too complicated and interpretations perhaps too eloquent in order to take them on board. So people are reflected by bookshelves. So what we have to do in a way is to cross a chasm with possibly small steps. So this interface, which is trying to connect science, which has abundant evidence, experience, wisdom, with society who is desperately seeking something to rely on. And then there is a sort of interface which must be supported by something. Trying to further organize the meaning situation which we are, it's not only that we have more facts today. We have systems which create facts. We have systems with self-organization. We have situations where uncertainties increase exponentially. We have wicked problems, and we are part of the problem in a way in environmental and societal issues. So we need something different. So that historically, that has been made very clear which things are pillars of effective interface of science and society. So first of all, we must have excellent higher education and science. It's good to have institutional advice system which challenges this knowledge to the highest level in countries. It should be best knowledge, it should be mandated, it should be open and transparent. Then, of course, it's necessary to organize some connectivity of society, which means personal contacts, trust, somehow worked out examples. What we do in Estonia, we systematically train top scientists and policymakers how to talk to each other. We bring them together and train them together how to talk to each other. But anyway, this is no more enough. And why? The pattern of knowledge production and using has changed. This scheme, this slide and next slide are to some extent, or actually strongly oversimplified. But there is some bit of truth in those. So in some past, say a few decades ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, there was a very strong chain of production and use of knowledge. There was sitting scientist in some lab, there was inventor, same floor, there was engineer, other floor and neighboring house and factory next street, and scientist was paid from the profit of the factory. What is now different? Very little bit. There is no such chain anymore. scientists are working somewhere in separate houses, and they contribute into the enormous pool of knowledge by publication, by presentations, by talking to each other and to society. Now, some other people, be them inventors, engineers, entrepreneurs, you name it, they fish interesting things from this pool in order to make new cool items, organize sales. And of course, in order to have money for science at all, there must be effective sales of cool items. But scientists are no more paid from the profit of, they are paid from tax money, which means that society is now involved intrinsically into production and use of science. Society is no more a target. Society is now part of the situation and problem we have, which means that there is no sense to try to solve this problem with the same thinking we used when we created this problem, if we could paraphrase Albert Einstein. So the change, which is actually justification of today's talk, is the classic task of science advice was simple: convince the Prime Minister and you are fine. This could be, in a way, sarcastically expressed by words of Jossif Stalin, the leader of Soviet Russia, who used to say that it doesn't matter how people vote, it only matters how the votes are counted. So even this is too much contrast example. The classic doesn't work anymore. It's not enough to convince policymakers. They cannot make decisions which can't be realized. They can't make decisions against the will of society. This is the cornerstone of our democracy. So the task for scientists now is to convince the society. We do have lessons from the current COVID-19 pandemic. What does it mean to connect science and society and policy in such really hard days for many nations? What we have to do is to communicate not only facts, but also complexity and uncertainty. And these are intrinsic features of the universe, as mathematicians probably know at best. So those two properties of science, we have to explain them to both policymakers and public. We have to accept and explain that our knowledge improves so rapidly that results which are just 1 week old could be already totally obsolete or even dangerous. We have to explain to society that scientists may have different opinions, and sometimes they have to have different opinions. We have to bring around the table not only people who have different opinions in one field of science, but people from radically different fields of science. And then again, the threesome: build trust, build trust, build trust. The red line here, which needs to be understood when we talk to society and policy, is that we scientists, engineers, we have no mandate for making political decisions. We do not have political responsibility. We have not been elected by people in our countries. What we can and must do, we have to provide the very best information. Other people who have mandate from the nation, they make decisions. So the change today is that both scientists and policymakers, they not only extract, carry, and use information, they have to explain why they make decisions of some kind. So the communication to society has to be now done together. So this is the task now. So we have to communicate the most sparkling science, the best engineering to saturated audience, who is saturated by information flux from enormous number of different directions. What we have seen, those who really communicate to society, we see the hunger for proper meaning from different cohorts of society. We see that it is absolutely necessary to stay with facts and express as little as possible your opinion. The facts are doing their own work. We have to rely on explanations of the meaning of facts and how the facts are created. There is no reason, no point to fight with memes. You will lose, definitely. They're always stronger than you. What we have to fight for is to fight for space where the truth, where adequate information may spread. And this I am pretty much personally convinced going through the Soviet Empire and seeing how the adequate information did it work so effectively that the empire failed. The question is that perhaps information space is so full that information space is so saturated, there is no more place to put your information. Nobody has access to it. It's not true. There is space. There is a lot of space. Let's take a look at social media in the post-truth world. The numbers here for social media users are for Estonia. They are definitely different for different countries. So more than half of people in Estonia get information basically from social media. And something like 40% are using that for learning. Okay, we know that the problem is that social media may be misused and manipulated. So what the question which I'm trying to ask and asking also from fellow academies in Europe, why scientists do not use this channel massively for communication in their opinion? If we are not there, it's a great sin, because the community of their users, which is more than half of many nations, they just can't locate your opinion. They don't have access to your opinion. They can't read scientific papers. If you don't bring your opinion to the space where it could spread, it's one of the greatest sins which scientists could do. There is a change in classic Pareto's law. You know, the classic Pareto law is that 20% of landowners owned 80% of land 140 years ago. This 80-20 proportion is well known and used in great many explanations of the world. Contemporary times, Pareto's law has changed. It has changed so that 1% of people control 40% of nations' income. In say US 10 years ago, I think today the proportion is even more contrasted. In social media, a few percent of users, a few people out of each 100 create almost entire content of social media. Facebook, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Twitter, Snapchat, you name it. So the result is that minds of people are impacted by a few. And again, the corollary is that the possibilities of different environments of social media, they are enormous. The number of characters is limited in scientific papers, but it is not limited in internet, not yet. And it doesn't matter whether it's controlled by specific algorithms or not. What we can do is to lead the 99% of those who just would like to have some information from social media. So what I'm saying is relying on sort of free translation of Martin Luther, the founder of Lutheran Church almost 500 years ago. He wrote something like, if devil has stolen some of our treasures, the full right to take it back any time. So why not to exploit the contemporary Pareto's law, having in mind that if only a few % of users create almost the entire content of Facebook, Twitter, etc. If we look at the percentage of researchers and developers and engineers in developed countries, it's 5% or something. So it's not a question why don't you post, but I think it's an imperative. Post your results and recommendations into Facebook in simple language. This is the hardest part of the thing. But what you can do and what you can start with, just a few examples how Estonian Academy of Sciences is exploiting this channel. Sorry about having the examples mostly in Estonian language, but I think that the picture is telling more than 1,000 words. So you can put information about all events, what you do in your institutions, in your academies, in your universities. It is read. You reflect distinctions. This is particular distinction 2 years ago when among 3,000 most influential scientists were 7 Estonians, which is against any odds. You can channel popular science papers additionally. This is about artificial intelligence, an interview with one of Academy members. You can put memorial events. This is exhibition dedicated to one of the first Academy members in Estonia in 1930s. Academy members are elected for life, so if somebody passes away, you can make this person great again. You can talk as scientists about, say, history of architecture. This is a blog of one engineer who constructed, not blog, but it's an overview of one engineer who constructed several beautiful houses in Estonia about 8 years ago. You can talk about science policy. You can make much more powerful the voice of academy, research councils, different institutions, societies. So, to my understanding, the new imperative today we have for conducting science, society, and policy is to occupy social media with facts, with adequate interpretation and explanations of how our world functions. Not saying that this is true and you have to believe it, showing the way how we think, showing the manner how we develop new knowledge, showing the way how we compare facts, how we think. This is what is necessary to spread. Many people who only use social media for information, they have this channel as the only way for reaching them. And just to make very sure sometimes that even disaster-based communication could be used by scientists. So if you are very short in examples of how important is following sort of core information, then me as a marine scientist mostly now, we always say that the core information about our seas and oceans is bathymetry, how deep the water is in some location. And if some captain or somebody who is steering the ship doesn't recognize, doesn't take into account this important information, This is what happens. This is a result of intentionally ignoring information about bathymetry. So what I'm willing to say is that connecting science, society, and policy is doable, and first of all, via social media. Thank you very much for listening.
Fascinating, very, very fascinating, Professor. You've given us a direction, shown us the way. Okay, very good. So let us have some time for interactions here. While we are waiting for a few people to send chat messages, I'm going to pick on a few of my friends here who I'm sure will have comments for you. Before we go to Hans Hoyer, we'll start with my friend Ala, who is the incoming president of IFEES. Then we'll go to Sam Mukasa, and anybody else who wants to chat, just all you have to do is send a text message. So Ala, come in, sir. Ala
Professor Soomere, yes, hi, Professor Soomere, very inspiring, and I think it gives us a good direction to start using social media to spread the knowledge, which we don't do that often. The question that I have, though, is some of the messages are very difficult to convey, and especially, I was thinking throughout about one topic that you mentioned several times, which is climate change. It's very difficult for the public to see, to understand, to process, because processing the information is a key aspect. To process the magnitude and the seriousness of something like climate change, because they don't see the consequences right away. You showed that boat that capsized, for example, so the consequences are very evident, but in climate change, it's much more, it's a slower process, it takes a longer time. What can we do to convey that message in a meaningful way?
Thank you very much for this question. It is one of the most complicated things to communicate, simply because most things which happen in some other parts of the world. People tend to take very seriously those things that happen to themselves. So climate change is a slow process, which is another problem. And the third problem is that climate change is a sort of threshold-based process. For a long time, nothing happens. Resilience of ecosystems is so strong that those systems just absorb the changes, don't feel. And then at some instant, things fall together. So this is one of the hardest things to communicate. What we have used in Estonia, and part of my research is also marine climate of waves, climate of storm surges. We tried to explain single results, like in areas which have complicated shape, like the Baltic Sea or the Red Sea or South China Sea. One of the most important drivers of climate change, wave climate change, is not increase in wind speed, but rotation of wind direction. And we have explained in tens of occasions how to measure that, how to identify that, and what could it mean, for example, for single harbors. And based on our own results, local results based on local measurements, and even if on satellite information, then that satellite information which is relevant to the particular shores. It takes time. It is not possible to explain in one move that is disaster looming. What we have explained very slowly was that extreme water levels in some parts of our shoreline, they are increasing by 1 centimeter a year, which is 5 times faster than the increase in ocean water level. So we have avoided sort of general message that things will be become bad very soon. We have tried to explain how we reached those results and what they could mean for a particular ship owner or a person who just wishes to go fishing. And it seems that this kind of attitude, explaining things very locally, and then explaining that at another location just 100 kilometers apart, things could be completely different. This kind of small messages, like water drops on stone, they seem to work. There is no way to explain the entire complexity of climate change to people who do not have preparation for scientific thinking. But what you can explain is that there are changes and they are different in different locations.
Good. Samuel, Kasaf, come in, Sam.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you very, very much for that thought-provoking presentation. I have to mention that I have been dean of 2 colleges of science and engineering, and the first thing I did at each one of those, when I was starting each one of those appointments, was to ensure that we invaded all channels of communication, including social media. On the issue of climate change, I have pointed out in the Northern Hemisphere when I've been talking to audiences that right there where we are sitting, just a mere 15,000 years ago, there was 2 kilometers of ice that's no longer there. So climate changed. And I point out that the issue is not so much whether climate changes, but whether we can tease out natural cycles from the anthropogenic signal that you and I are responsible for. Okay, so that's really the issue. Climate changes, and there's evidence everywhere that climate has changed, and you can point that out to audiences. But let me finish with a question, and that is, even among scientists and engineers, we sometimes do not agree on what the final answer is. And that's what makes it so much fun, because if you challenge me, I go back to my lab and try to verify my numbers and see if they're reproducible and so on. If everyone is given license to take their perspective of science on a particular issue online, in social media, and we just going to become part of the noise that is so difficult to filter in order to come up with what society will accept as an actionable direction.
Absolutely right. So one thing which I didn't mention, when we go to social media, we go based on peer-reviewed publications in good journals. Normally in first or in some cases second quartile. So we comment results which have been peer reviewed and published. We just don't comment things which happen anyway. It might be perhaps too restrictive, but this is the way how science works. Even though the peer review system does have its problems, we know there are many problems around, still after going through that, there is large probability that the results are adequate. And this is the pillar which we use when we go to social media. We comment some interesting implications from research work, from our own research work.
Couple more questions and then we'll hand it over to Hans. This is from India. Kiran says it's a good presentation. Thank you. Now that the pandemic has democratized learning to a large extent through online education, I believe that social media can be used effectively with better student engagement. Can we convince our conventional teachers and systems that this is necessary to use more of the online teaching education?
Yes, and this is now a new thing, and there is a lot of noise. But I think it's like with many other things in history. If you look back into European history for 500 years approximately, the invention of printing by Gutenberg, printing of books, led to similar noise. There was a category of small books which were controversial or even attacking. They were called pamphlets approximately 500 years ago, and they created a lot of turbulence in today's UK and also European mainland. So they have stayed. We still have sometimes books which are printed by, written by very strange authors and printed somewhere, not in fashionable houses. It is there. But people in majority read good books. And if the good books do not exist, if they were not existing, then we would have been really in problem. So what I'm saying is, the more we are putting high quality content into social media for just reading, for teaching, for re-teaching, the better will be the world.
Okay. Aditya asks, can you give me an example of a wicked problem?
Oh, climate change. We are part of the problem. We don't know exactly how much mankind has contributed to climate change, but it has. And it's not clear how to eliminate our impact without eliminating ourselves. Whatever we do creates an impact. So it's like trying to add together an infinite series of additives. There are many definitions of wicked problems, but one of those is that those are problems to which we are part of and source of. So whatever we do, we change the problem to another one. Whatever solution we use, we create another problem.
Okay. Thank you so much. We go back to Hans Hoyer. Comments from you, Hans, and then we can close.
Thank you very much, Krishna. Professor Soomere, your presentation was so meaningful to me personally, and I know to our global community, because what you have touched upon is exactly, I currently live in the United States, and the relevance, importance of your comments are absolutely strategic, powerful, and meaningful. I just wanted to make that comment per se. And one of the things, and of course I'm delighted in working closely with Krishna and the IFEES GEDC community at the number of attendees. What I want to make sure that this recording gets the kind of visibility we'll send to many places that should have heard your presentation. I'm personally very, very much inspired, and I'd like to find ways to connect you to our work because it is deeply relevant, strategic, and important. Just a couple of other things I wanted to mention to you is that certainly an important commitment that all the leaders here that I work with very closely globally is the new generation of students. And I think your comments are inspiring to them. And I just wanted to plant the seed is that we are hosting next week, working in close partnership with good friends in Africa, in Europe, and other parts, our global virtual conference. Not only would I love for you to be able to participate, but I'll send you some information, perhaps some of your students that you're closely connected with in Estonia could maybe join us. And I'd like to find a win-win way, perhaps for some of them to join us. I just wanted to let you know. This is an exciting conference we hold annually, bringing engineering students, faculty, deans, corporate colleagues, and so forth together. And I'll send some information to you. And I want to just share with all of us that are participating in this thoughtful presentation. If you've not have registered yet, please do join us. Write to us if you have any information per se. Genuinely, Professor Soomere, it's a real privilege to meet you and to listen to your thoughtfulness. And I look forward for us to stay in touch. Thank you kindly.
Thank you very much. Next week is extremely busy already, but I definitely read my emails and I shall forward the relevant information to my students.
Yeah, thank you kindly.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Professor Soomere, and thank you everybody who has joined us today. Be happy, be healthy, and be safe. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Peace be with you.
Bye.